Good afternoon, everybody. I think Sir set the stage right for me to talk about the four sectors that will take India to Viksit Bharat 2047. He rightly mentioned we are currently about 4.1 trillion economy, 3,000 per capita income, and we have goals to reach $30 trillion economy by 2047. But as of now, the timing works in our favor. By 2030, 69% of Indian population will be at a working age, our highest in the history. And the median age today stands close to 29 years, whereas China, Japan, and most of Europe is aging well past that. So today my real question isn't will India grow? It is where will the next wave of high value growth come from? And how do we make sure that the world doesn't just buy from India but believes what we build? And that belief is what I would like to call brand Bharat, and building it is what today and next 21 years is going to be all about. I want to walk through four sectors which I feel would do the heaviest lifting to achieve this goal. Standing here today in Bengaluru, I cannot not start with global capability centers. India today hosts over 2,100 GCCs that employs about 2.3 million people, generating a revenue of more than $100 billion. But the number that matters here is not the revenue, it's the function. Over 1,200 of these centers today do genuine AI and engineering work. 20 years ago, a GCC in Bengaluru would answer a phone for a bank in New York, but today it decides what the bank risk models would look like. That's a trust story, a trust built over 2 decades. Today, India has proudly become the world's center of excellence for GCC. 20 years ago, global companies came to India for cost reductions, but today they come to India for leadership and talent. India is no longer where the work just gets done. It is increasingly where the global products are designed, critical business decisions are influenced, and innovation for global enterprises driven. India has evolved from being the world's back office to being its innovation and capability hub. By 2030, this ecosystem is set to raise about to 2,900 GCCs, employing about 2.9 million people, and our ambition for 2047 is around 5,000 such centers, which will put a single sector to an employment of 4 to 4.5 million people and generating a revenue of more than 200 to 250 billion dollars a year. GCC converts global trust into Indian jobs and Indian incomes. But deciding for the world is one kind of trust, and building for it with our own hands is the hardest test, and that test is manufacturing. Our manufacturing share of GDP sits roughly at around 16 to 17%, whereas we are still way behind China that sits at say 28%, even though we have had a decade of Make in India and PLI schemes. Here is my one honest reason why. India spends only about 0.6% of our GDP on research and development, whereas countries like United States spend about 3.5%, Israel close to 6%. Less research means one simple thing, less original technology of our own. But here is an interesting fact. A specific kind of GCC, engineering and R&D driven, is now the category that is the fastest growing in the entire GCC ecosystem. Bringing many more of this manufacturing linked GCCs to India, paired with our PLI sustained scheme, over the next decade could be our easiest and the clearest route to reach 20 to 25% of manufacturing share by 2047. Manufacturing remains our best tool for creating jobs, and manufacturing linked GCCs help us to capture the design dollar, not just the assembly dollar. But we cannot rent a design from a foreign parent forever. At some point, we'll have to have our own people to build and originate them. According to Niti Aayog, for every one international student who comes to India, 25 of our Indian students go and study abroad. For decades, our brightest engineers have built chips in California, ran research labs in Munich because that work didn't exist back home. That should begin to change. Institutions such as ISRO, DRDO, and leading private companies should proactively identify India's most promising young talent, train them, sponsor them to the finest higher education and research opportunities anywhere in the world, and create a clear pathway for them to return, build, innovate, and lead in India for the rest of the world. Programs like Brain Gain Bharat, offering reallocation grants up to 14 crore rupees for top returning talent, is trying to do the exact same thing. But where will this talent return to? The private sector. that's proving itself faster right now than ever in two sectors that is testing India's leadership in most literally our security and our frontier. India's defense production reached an all-time high of 1.78 lakh crore in the last financial year, up by just 40,000 crores in 2014. That's 4x of a return in a decade. Defense exports have grown even faster from 686 crores in 2013-14 to 338,424 crores today, with Indian defense equipments now reaching over 80 countries. But the numbers tell only half the story. The real transformation is who is building India's defense capabilities. A decade ago, the private sector only largely supplied components for Indian defense. Today, companies like Tata Advanced Systems, Bharat Forge, L&T, Adani Defense, Solar Industries, and the new generation defense tech startups are designing, developing, manufacturing the complete systems. Operation Sindoor last year demonstrated this transformation in real time. This time, the story wasn't about our targets being hit from our missiles. It was about Indian private industries delivering battlefield ready technology. Alpha designs, Triple S defense, new space research that proved themselves under operational conditions. In defense, there is no better endorsement than performance in combat. The best sales pitch for a weapon was never a brochure, it's always been the battlefield. This is how precisely the world's leading defense ecosystem evolved. Governments defined strategic priorities, but private companies drove innovation, speed, and technological breakthroughs. India today has more than 190 defense tech startups that nearly raises over $250 million every year, creating an ecosystem where established manufacturers and agile startups work side by side. By 2029, the government's target is 3 lakh crore in defense production and 50,000 crores in export. Looking ahead at 2047, India not only has a chance to secure itself, but to emerge as one of the world's leading defense and manufacturing exports. And now, there's a satellite that's watching over every battlefield where exactly our story heads next. If defense shows what can happen if private sector is finally trusted with the whole ecosystem, space is showing the same shift faster with even less government handholding. For decades, Indian space meant one name, ISRO. That's no longer true. On July 18th this year, Skyroot Aerospace launched its Vikram 1 rocket into a 450-kilometer orbit, making India only the third country after United States and China to achieve a privately developed orbital launch. Skyroot did this within just 6 years of this sector being open to private players and became the first space tech company unicorn valued over $1.1 billion today. Skyroot isn't alone. India's private companies have raised a record of $871 million only through this July, and companies like Pixel, Agnikul, Digantara are amongst them with over 399 space tech companies now operating in India. India's space economy sits roughly at around $8 billion today. That's 2% of the global space economy that's worth over $650 billion. The government's target by 2033 is to reach $44 billion, and for the first time, private capital, not just public budget, is funding that climb. Push that to 2047, India is credibly among world's top 3 or 4 national space economies. Notice the thread that's running through all 4 sectors: GCC, defense, space, and manufacturing. The pattern repeats. Government sets the direction, takes the first risk, and the private sector, alongside the talent, does the building. That's not an economic strategy. That's how you build a brand. A country's brand isn't built by a logo or a slogan. It's built the same way any company builds trust, by consistently shipping. For every GCC, the ship can be a decision instead of a ticket. For every factory, the ship is a design instead of an assembly. Every drone that finds its target, and every rocket that reaches its orbit. Each one is a small deposit into the same one account. That account is Brand Bharat. Building Brand Bharat isn't a government project. It isn't a private sector project either. It's both, together doing what each does to its best. The measure of a rising nation was never how cheaply it worked for the world. It is about how the world trusts what it builds. That trust is building brand Bharat and how we have to become a developed nation that we have promised by ourselves by 2047. Thank you.